facing you in the workforce, there are some commonalities here. Change uncertainty and burnout, leadership and accountability gaps, communication and collaboration barriers. That might be interesting for some of you, but there's certainly common themes across the board. What did you come looking for? Well, we heard these things consistently. Learn. I think we've been pretty full of insights here, so I hope we've ticked that box well and truly. Grow your skills, fantastic. Get inspired. Have we done those things? Good to hear. I love this question. I'm fascinated when we leave open-ended sentences and see how you all finish them. So HR should stop or continue the answers that came up. Stop avoiding difficult conversations. Yeah. I keep coming back to one of the things that really has just been ringing in my brain since the conversation on DEI yesterday afternoon. Dr. Black Hackett's encouragement around those brave spaces. That really lands with that. And continue leading with empathy. And then sentiment about the future of work. Well, it's an interesting cocktail, isn't it? A little bit of everything, a little bit for everyone. Overwhelmed, optimistic, and transformed. I also did want to share a couple of funny answers because we did get all the insights as well. So a few of you finished that sentence when we were talking about how the working world feels today. Slaying dragons from faraway lands, which I loved. And the other one, which brought back a word I have not heard in a long time, described the working world as a vortex of hogwash. So we've got some creative vocabulary going on in here, and a little bit of a fun way of just showing how we can use AI and the right data to bring us insights and to spark conversation. We hope you're going to continue the celebration right after this session concludes. Food, cocktails, DJ. I heard the reputation of the Workhuman dance floor, so I hope you'll not disappoint with my first outing to it tonight. And certainly lots of opportunities to keep connections going. But the main question, are you ready for this keynote conversation? I know I am. I'm pumped, and not just because it's ridiculously funny, but because Trevor's latest role at Microsoft is so fascinating to me. I'm not sure if you're across this, but recently Trevor's been appointed as Microsoft's Chief Questions Officer. Would love a job like that. Where do you get that job title? Where he's helping the world's biggest tech company ask better questions about AI, about humanity, and about the future. He's also hosting a brilliant series there called The Prompt, where he explores how AI can tackle some of the biggest challenges out there. I'm talking addiction, education gaps, emotional well-being. It's a role that is rooted in curiosity, which is something we've talked about a lot on this stage over the last 2 days, and it's designed to explore how technology can actually make us more human. And there's something really fascinating about celebrities and celebrity guest speakers at corporate events. They're often here to entertain or to draw a crowd, but on this stage, as I hope you've seen, we dig deeper. From Rob Lowe to Michelle Obama, the names might have been big, but it's been more than star power. And what I've noticed from my involvement in Workhuman Life is that we're looking for people who have a story to tell and who are prepared to be vulnerable, get candid with us. People like Viola Davis and Marl Clooney, people who are really standing at the intersection of pressure and purpose and have something really meaningful to share with all of you that you can take away and do something with. And inviting someone hilarious and thoughtful like Trevor Noah to Workhuman is also about the human side of Workhuman. We are all here as caretakers of humans, but hey, we're all humans too, right? And sometimes we need to be reminded of that. We need a little moment for us to just sit in the joy, to feel, to laugh, and to be humans together for a bit. And I'm sure we're going to get an opportunity to do that in this conversation. Trevor Noah has made a career out of turning pain into perspective. He wrote a phenomenal book I recommend to you all on growing up during the apartheid. He's lived through incredible complexity and injustice, and still finds a way to lead with joy, with humour, and relentless curiosity. So we welcome him today, not just for his wit, but for his wisdom, and for the questions that he has been brave enough to ask and continues to be brave enough to ask. Can you please welcome back Kiana Schmiegel and give a warm Workhuman welcome to Trevor Noah.
Good afternoon, everyone. How you doing? So, hey everybody. I'm back. I am not alone. I told you hold, and you did, so thank you so much. Listen, I am so honored to be here with all of you, and even more thrilled, sorry, to be here with someone who needs no introduction, Mr. Trevor Noah. So listen, as you all know, at WorkHuman, we believe that humanity belongs at the center of the workplace, and that leadership is as much about presence and empathy and curiosity as it is about strategy and scale. And so our guest today has embodied those qualities, although the mic may not work. I'll just leave it. We'll share it. Yeah, we'll just share it.
No, I think it works. It's just low. They'll raise it a little bit.
Oh, okay, fine. Be like that. So anyways, he's embodied those qualities on global stages, across cultures, and in countless conversations where laughter meets learning. Like I learned he does not want to share my microphone. So today we are exploring how storytelling and humor and courage can shape a better workplace experience and the world. So why don't we dive in?
Let's not dive in. I just landed, and that was the dive in. Let me tell you, there are a few things that will make you rethink your entire life, like landing in Colorado on a stormy day. I've reprioritized my friendships. It's really wonderful. Like you don't need to go to a retreat. Just land once in Denver, and you'll know which way your life should be headed. So let's gently cruise it.
Okay. Yeah. We are going to gently land with this first question. So listen, I want to talk to you because most folks know you from The Daily Show.
Right.
Right? And that was the first introduction for a lot of us to you. And so since then, though, your job has changed and shifted in some fairly interesting ways. And so I just want for you to share with all of us what, since that transition, has been some of the craziest, maybe funniest, maybe all of the above moments that you've experienced after that time.
Well, that's interesting. I guess I would break it down into two different parts. On the one side, it's been how people have responded to me. So the one thing I've learned, one of the biggest things I've learned since leaving The Daily Show is the world that we live in, media-wise, has changed dramatically. And one of the biggest changes is that people don't know where we are in space and time anymore. And what I mean by that is there are people who still come up to me saying, I look forward to your show tomorrow. And then I'll say, what show? They always make me feel like there's something I didn't know about. And they go, your show, I love the show, and I saw the thing you said. I was watching you the other day on TikTok, and I loved it on The Daily Show. And I said, but I'm not at The Daily Show. I haven't been there for years. And they go, that's not possible. I saw you. And people literally, so like everywhere I go, I keep, and then there's some people who just realize I left. So I keep, it's like reliving your retirement over and over again.
Right.
So that's probably been the weirdest thing.
Okay.
The other one has been, I don't know if it's hilarious, but it's been fun seeing or hearing the news from other people because I don't keep up with it every day.
Sure.
So I'll just have random people running up to me like in a mall or somewhere and just being like, did you see? And I go, no. And they're like, you didn't see? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about right now. And they're like, oh, you'll see. That's all they say, and then they walk away. And I'm like, what'll I see? And they're like, when you see, you'll talk about it in your show. I'll be looking forward to it. And I'm like, oh wow, this is going to be bad news.
So these two groups of people, they find each other?
They genuinely do.
Okay.
They genuinely do.
I see what you're saying.
But otherwise it's been a wonderful change. I think anyone who's shifted careers or even just companies within your career will know there's a beautiful teething process. There's a moment where you rediscover parts of yourself that you maybe left behind, and then there are parts of yourself that are new that you learn, and I think I'm still in that phase. I'm enjoying it.
So I love that. I kind of want to stick with this piece of parts of you that you're rediscovering and parts of you that are new, right? Because your role in The Daily Show quickly became the role of soother, make it make sense, Trevor, fix it, Felix, however you want to describe it, right? And so, but the reason why it was so good, if you didn't know, it was so good.
Thank you.
The reason why it was so good is because you were able to do this thing that I do terribly, which is to balance humor with insight, right? And it's something that I feel like a lot of people can't do that well, but being truly thoughtful while making everybody feel comfortable is a special skill. And so as we talk about you kind of transitioning out of the Daily Show, I'm wondering if that's a piece that is stuck with you, or if you've discovered a new way of doing that in a slightly different role.
Oh, that's something that was with me my whole life. I have yet to meet an African person who does not have humor just pouring through every part of their lives. And I'm not even close to being the funniest person in my family. I'm the only person who chose to do it as a profession. You know, I think like my grandfather, my grandmother, my mom, I think every single one of them were funnier. They just have no time for strangers. So I think I've lived in a world where that was the only way you could process things, you know. And as I've traveled the world, I've realized many cultures share this. You know, I've often gotten along with people from Ireland, for instance. I think the Irish have one of the strongest senses of humor, and it's also because they've been through so much, but the way they've processed it is through this cutting edge lens where they've basically recontextualized what reality isn't, you know, based on what they thought it should be, and they've used humor as that tool. And I think that's what humor is. You know, is sometimes people get it wrong. They'll say to me, they'll go, Trevor, do you find everything funny? Is that what it is? You find everything funny? And I go, no, I just find the funny in everything, right? So today, when we're trying to land and then we couldn't land, it was terrifying. If you've ever been in a botched landing, you know how it feels, right? We're coming down, going over the Rockies, plane was shaking, coming down, and then there was a moment where the plane was swaying, and I was like, oh, this could be it. There's a moment you get like a little taste in your mouth, and I was like,
Should it be a taste of imminent demise?
yes,
Okay.
yes. I looked it up, and apparently your body releases metals, so that's what the taste is, like a zinc.
Did you look this up while the plane was swaying?
No, while I was driving here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The Wi-Fi was off by that point.
Right.
But it was terrifying. It genuinely is in that moment. But there was also one of the funniest thoughts came into my head because the pilots were coming down, we were trying to land. And then as we were going to land, we sort of weren't, then we were going back up. And then the pilot just came on, he went, boom. Yeah, that didn't work. And I mean, half the plane was just more terrified by this. But I was like, that is one of the funniest things to hear from the person who has 300 lives in their hands. So yeah, so that's a moment with the humor. I'm not finding it funny, but I'm finding the funny in it, and it's helping me process this moment.
Yes, and you were helping me to process you in this moment. So thank you so much for that. And listen, I can imagine that if you're going in for a landing and you've maybe been trying to land, maybe you've been circling a little bit, and then it's diverted to a different airport, right? That you may be feeling a little fatigued, perhaps unsure. You're starting to taste the zinc, and you're like, what is that about? And I'm imagining, watch this transition, that some of the leaders in this audience are feeling a bit unsure, maybe a little fatigued right now. Might you have for them?
So, to continue the analogy, the one thing I would say is what I guess, you know, a good pilot says, and that is, every time I've asked a pilot, and I always do, I'll wait, after a harrowing flight, I always wait to speak to the pilots, and then I'll ask them, on your scale of 1 to 10, how crazy was that? And the reason I do this is because I've come to realize there's a big disparity between how I think it's going and how it's actually going, right? So the further back you sit in the plane, the worse it gets. It's like a roller coaster. So the pilots oftentimes have the best feeling for how it is, but also, most importantly, they're the ones controlling it, so they feel what's happening. And so I'll often say to a client, how was that? And then they'll go, oh, that was like a 4 out of 10, or that was a 5, that wasn't bad. Sometimes they'll say something scary. They'll go, that was an 8. And I'm like, okay, so we were both in it. But the main thing all of them have said to me is they go, it's nothing I haven't seen before. And I think in those moments, what I've learned about great leadership, funny enough, is not just that they trust their experience, but the thing great pilots do is the same thing I think great leaders do, and that is they communicate with their teams, right? So I think fear is an interesting emotion in that it lives in uncertainty. It breeds in uncertainty. And so there are a lot of leaders who are unsure, but I don't think a leader needs to be sure. What a good leader needs to be is communicative, right? Because if you're with the right team, you can make anything happen. You can't choose the situations that you're going to be in, but you can choose the people you're going to be in the situation with, right? And so I often think to myself, like when I'm working with my teams, whether it was at the Daily Show, whether it's in the work that I do now, across podcasts, books, whatever it is, I try and think, okay, what are we trying to do? How are we trying to do it? And if that goes wrong, how are we planning to pivot? And so I think too many leaders have been told that you have to know, and your team wants you to know it. But I think there's a lot of power in saying, listen, we don't know. Especially now, like in the age of AI, there's a lot of pressure on every single leader of every single company to say, we know. They don't know. That's the honest truth. Nobody knows. Today we're talking about agents. A few years ago we were just talking about AI. A few years before that we were just talking about machine learning. So we don't know. And we won't know until it settles. And maybe it never settles. Even that we don't know. But I think in that regard, a great leader is somebody who's going, okay, I work off the principles that we have. I work with the team that I have, and I try and understand the goal that we're trying to get to. And sometimes the greatest discoveries and the greatest moments I find come from not getting to where you thought you were going to, but getting to where you sort of needed to get to.
Yes.
Just because the team was driving you in the right direction. So it's akin to a boat that is in a storm that doesn't get to the port that it was going to, but it finds a land that it wasn't intending to be at. But it's because the crew worked so well in just keeping that ship afloat. And it may be harrowing in moments, and I think that's what life is, but I honestly think a great leader is somebody who says, the most important thing is the team and the human beings I'm working with, and the goal is something that we hope to get to, but we also understand can shift at any given time.
Yeah, and I think if we take that analogy, please, yes, this is such a thoughtful answer. And so if we take that analogy with the boat, and that we intended to be here, but we're here, and you take that a leader doesn't know, what happens then in a situation like Columbus, who insists these are Indians, we're in India?
I mean, if you look at Columbus's history, right, it was ignorance.
Do you see how he just picks this up?
But it's true, it was ignorance, and ironically, it wasn't necessarily his arrogance, funny enough. That's a misconception that people have. They think Christopher Columbus was arrogant, and he was like, no, I found this new path to India, these are Indians. I'm arrogant about it. In fact, it was the opposite. He doubted their ability to do what they had done. That's what it actually was. He was like, there's no ways we've done that. It is impossible to do what you're saying we've done. Nobody has gone there, nobody's discovered a new land, nobody has, and so until his dying day, he refused to accept the possibility that was presented to him by other explorers and cartographers who said, hey, listen, you landed in another place, somewhere that we've never been before, it is not India. And he refused that. And so I think that analogy for me, shows you, where you're trying to be as a leader is, I think the mistake people often make is, they think of a leader as somebody who's doing something apart from the group. I always think of a leader as a position within the group, right? What you're trying to do, in my opinion, is coalesce ideas, coalesce effort, coalesce intention, and move it forward in a direction that suits the organization or the group of people or the society that you're within. But I think the misconception we've created is that a leader is apart from the thing. It's not. I think a great leader is a servant, to be honest. A great leader is serving every level of the organization. They're going, how can I empower you? All right, what do you need to be better? What do you need to be better? What do you need to be better? What do you need to be okay, then my job as the leader is to make that happen. And I think the leader is, just like they would say, in African African folklore all the time. They go like the tip of the spear,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, but the tip of the spear is not the most important part of the spear. It's just a centralized focal point for the spear's penetrating power. That's really what it is. And I think of a leader in that same way. And so for me, if you have a leader, or if you are the leader who's going, no, this is what it is, this is completely this, I know that I'm right, you should be worried, because I think in order to do great things, you always have to keep a good measure of doubt. Always. And it doesn't mean you have to have self-doubt. It doesn't mean that you have to minimize yourself as a person. But that doubt is also the fuel for curiosity. What if there's another way? What if there's a different way to do this? What if we could improve? What if I'm not right? What if that quiet person in the room has the best ideas, but they're just afraid to speak? Those small moments are where I think you can use doubt and you can synthesize it into a fuel that turns into curiosity, and that curiosity can then turn into discovery.
Listen, you're doing a great job. As somebody who describes themselves as insatiably curious, I tend to ask a lot of questions. I have to say I'm a bit envious because you have a new role in a partnership with Microsoft where you're the Chief Questions Officer. And so I want you to talk about what has inspired that role, and maybe elaborate a bit more on this idea that you were just on that thread of like how asking better questions can lead to those better outcomes.
I think that title was a very nice way for Microsoft and its president to not call me an idiot, which I probably am, by the way. You know, there's something that happened to me many years ago, I think it was 8 or 9 years ago, where I realized there's a power in not knowing. But we live in a world where everyone has to pretend that they know. Think of everyone in this room. How many times have you walked into a new company, a new position, a new meeting, a new whatever, and then you just have to act like you know what's going on, while people around you spout acronyms and they like shout out things and they say let's get back on that, and the GBCs, and we get with the AFABs and the DDoCs and you're there like and then now you're petrified going, I don't know what any of these things are, and it seems impossible. But we all think that we have to pretend to know because that means that we are then capable, right? Because everyone else says capable, they know. But really, all an acronym is a shorthand that the people there have made for themselves. And when you learn what it is, you realize it's something stupid.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Yeah, people will be like, oh, you know, the main thing we got to look, let's get that BTC, and we can, BTC and BTC, and then one day you find out it just means like behind the closet. They're just going to put things, because they store things there, and then that's where the trash gets taken out, and then you're like, oh, I thought this was a big company idea. They're like, no, we just call that BTC, just put it behind the closet, and then it's not as fancy as you think. And so, genuinely, I realized it's my life. I was like, I don't know. And so I'll be in a meeting, and I ask questions, and I love asking questions, and I go, what does that mean? I think I know what that means, but can you explain it? Can you go deeper on that? Well, I don't understand. What does that do? And I found that people who genuinely are comfortable in their role and they know what they're doing, they don't think of that as a sign of you lacking intelligence or lacking aptitude. They see it as the opposite. They see you as being engaged. They see you as somebody who's actively trying to learn. And so that's all I did. So I was lucky enough. I started working with Microsoft 8 years ago. It was a random encounter. I met the president, Brad Smith. We hit it off. We were there to talk about a book. And then he said to me, you love hardware. In the book I wrote about Windows, funny enough, and I have like a few pages in the book where I'm like slamming Windows 95 in particular.
Thank you. Thank you for your service.
And so and he was like, well, what is this about? And we started talking. Long story short, he took me to the hardware labs. I talked to the hardware team. There were a few hinges that I was in love with, and we talked about how to create a better hinge for a device. And they were like, do you want to come back? Do you want to come back and talk hinges? And I said, I would love to. And so what I do
as one does.
Yeah. All I do is I come in and I try to apply the mind of questioning. You know, I go like, the why, what is that? What is that? Why not? What are we missing? You know, and in many ways, when I think of it as a first principle, I think of how children do. One of the most annoying things about children is not that they ask you why, it's that half of the time you realize you don't know the answer. And then you're now stuck between a rock and a hard place of exposing yourself to your child and saying, I actually don't know. I've lived on this planet for many decades and I don't know the answer to that question. Or you're just like, no, it doesn't matter right now, because it is. But that foundation of learning, is going, I don't know. Why? How? Why? How? I don't know. How does that work? How does that not? What is this? What is the way you do this? And I've often found that those are the moments where you make breakthroughs. Those are the moments where you discover a better way. Those are the moments where you discover a deeper understanding. And so in that, genuinely, that's what I've been lucky enough to do, is I work with people who are way more brilliant than I'll ever be, way more accomplished than I'll ever be, but I get to enjoy being the idiots in the room saying, what about that? Why didn't you do that? And then they sometimes go, oh, actually we didn't think of that. And so it's been fun. I have like 4 or 5 patents with the team now. So yeah, it's been a
great.
journey.
You're just an idiot with 4 or 5 patents. Cool. I'm an inspiring idiot. Listen, I think something that you also do incredibly well, because there's the asking the questions, right? But it's also about how you ask the questions, how you get to a place where people can feel comfortable knowing the purpose and the intention behind you asking those questions, which is very different from how my husband has learned his new trigger is when I say, help me to understand.
That's code for, why would an idiot do it that way?
But you know, in HR speak, it's, so help me to understand how we got here. And so I'm just wondering for you, right, if you think about balancing this idea of emotion but also clarity in your work and bringing those two pieces together, whether it's storytelling or in comedy or in advocacy, like what helps you decide in those moments when you should ask that question, when you should speak out on a thing, when you should say, you know what, this is a subject that I need to dive into and be a part of?
I think it's when I feel like I either have a gap in information that can't be filled by the current discourse, or if I feel like there's a gap that isn't being filled. Does that make sense? So I think of it this way. There are any number of things that will be happening in and around the world at any given time. I will watch, I will read, I will try and learn the backstory, the current story, different viewpoints, and try and understand it. And oftentimes, the story is laid out for anyone who's actually willing to go out and read and learn and see. And so, in those moments, I genuinely don't feel like I should bother getting into the fray because it's happening. You know, and you know, let's say for news in America, unfortunately, it's become very much about like it's more about keeping people watching than keeping people informed, right? And so developing stories are very big. It's developing, breaking. I'm like, yeah, but you could just wait until it's broken, and then just tell us when you know, right? And someone will be like, no, but then the news will be out of date. But it's not. That's not true. Right? If you think of every generation that came before the live news cycle we have now, they knew what was happening in the world. They watched the news one time a day. I did with my parents, 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. You knew what had happened, you knew what you needed to know. But now we're inundated with things that seem like we need to know them, but we don't. Right? It's just stories that inflame you, infuriate you, make you fearful, make you misunderstand the world because they're incomplete pieces of a puzzle that is still being built. So in those moments, I genuinely don't, I hate being reflexive. I don't like to say anything about something that's just happened because I don't know. I want to understand what is going on, what is happening. And then what I mean by filling the gap is, if I have a thought and I'm noticing that the thought isn't being answered by the discourse, or the thought just doesn't exist out there, then I'll say, okay, I would like to contribute this thought to that while ask the question of the situation. Right? And I'm genuinely asking it 9 times out of 10. I'm not even saying anything because I'm curious about it. I would like to understand it. You know, like today was a great example. You know, like Grok, the AI that is part of like X, right? It's having like a crazy malfunction today, like right now, and it's going on this malfunction and it's spinning out of control, But the question that I then have about it is I go, if the people who make the AI cannot get the AI to do what they want it to do, then does that mean that we have a full grasp of AI? Or does that mean that AI is just working sometimes the way we want it to and then other times not? And if that's the case, are we comfortable fully rolling it out into everything right now? That's the question I have. Does that make sense?
So that makes sense.
Right.
My issue is that the people who are doing it don't necessarily have that question.
Oh yeah, but
And so how can we get you to them to get that question in there as it's coming out? Because there is a little bit of an assumption, right?
Yes.
Of it's better, just do it, work with it, it's gonna hallucinate, it's
Right.
going to do these things.
Right.
But in that way, it's also blunting for some folks maybe the invitation to ask the question of like, but
Right.
should it this often? You know, what is the optimal that we're looking for?
Yeah, so the difficulty is this. I think, I'm not sure, but I think one of the difficulties is nobody wants to be left behind when they think everybody is going to get something, right? And you see this in like herd mentality and in a stampede. If you've ever had the unfortunate experience of being part of a crowd that's in a stampede, you'll know that like people don't even know why they're doing it sometimes. You know, if you've ever seen like people on Black Friday, half the people actually don't know why they're in that panic. Half the people who are in the stampede are in it, but they don't even know what they're trying to get to. And they grab something because somebody else grabbed it, and now they're fighting with that person. But if you were able to pause the whole situation and say, hey, why do you want this stroller? They would go, I don't even have kids, I don't know. I just saw two people grab it and I grabbed it, and once they grabbed it, I didn't want to let go. And then we fought. And that is a strange thing that I find humans do, and you see it expanding across societies and even permeating corporations, right? Governments even. Nobody wants to be left behind. Right? You look at how most of the Cold War was fought over weapons that didn't exist. Right? Think about that for a moment. The United States was developing a nuclear weapon. Right? They had the nuclear weapon. The other countries didn't have it. But then they wanted to have it, and so they were like, we're going to try and make it. And then America thought they had it, so it made more. And then these people were like, they've got more, we've got to get some. And then America was like, they've got more, and then they made more. And then everybody started making, but it was all based on nothing initially, really. Companies, I think, will do the same thing, unfortunately. If they're not careful, they will panic and they'll try to catch up to a race that they think everyone else is winning, when the truth is, nobody else is winning because no one's really figured it out, right? And so I think in that regard, it's tough. Every time I talk to any leader of a company, I always say, pace yourself and think of evolution versus revolution. What are you actually trying to do? In the age where computers were slowly taking over from typewriters and people writing up documents, if you just ran in and slammed everybody with a computer and said, this is the new thing, we're doing it, it would have failed, right? Because without the people buying into it, the technology will be useless. I don't care what anyone tries to do with it. And so I think in this instance as well, it'll be the same thing. If you do not get the people to buy in and figure out how to meaningfully use AI as a tool, it's going to be pointless. Because the very workforce that people are hoping to supercharge, I don't think will buy into it. They'll feel like it's a tool that's being foisted upon them and maybe even being used to replace them. So they have no incentive to actually try and be part of this thing. And then I think if companies aren't doing a good job of explaining why this is part of a journey going forward, then why should they? And so I think that's where you're going to see the difference between great leaders and subpar leaders who are chasing because everyone's doing it, and others who are going, no, let's find a meaningful way to look at a technology that is here, whether we like it or not, and see how we can best use this to actually improve what we're doing, not just for our customers and our bottom line, but for the people who have actually made the company that we call ours.
I love that response, because what you have just done is endorse exactly the way me and our CTO have led this AI revolution within WorkHuman, and I see our leadership team sitting here, so you're welcome. He said we got it right. We asked the people first. So listen, in all of this asking questions, in the role that you have with Microsoft, it seems to be a thing that you do where you just start having conversations with people and then a thing happens. So you also have a foundation, right? But the idea of the partnership with your foundation and with Microsoft is the passion that you have around technology, about